and it's one that I think we all agree on, that residents under these schemes do not need more consultations. They need action, and this Parliament must deliver.
Many households pay estate rent charges on top of council tax, as we've heard, and in the worst cases, there are excessive or unexplained fees, charges for services that would normally be provided by local authorities, arbitrary administration costs, and fees imposed during a sale. Too many discover too late that roads, verges, and play areas are not adopted. No family should be ambushed by a large one-off bill for works that they could not foresee. Clear pre-sale disclosure and sensible reserve planning are absolutely essential. So I ask the Minister today 4 things. First, to bring forward secondary legislation promptly, define what insurance fees are permitted and end hidden commissions, and require standardised, transparent statements so residents can see where every single pound goes. Second, set professional standards for managing agents, mandatory qualifications and a robust code of practice that will lift the quality bar and give residents confidence that estates are run properly. Third, fix the major works regime, provide clear pre-sale information, require early engagement on big projects, plan sensible reserves and put safeguards in place so households are not hit by avoidable spikes. And fourth, make redress fast and affordable. Resource the first-tier tribunal and publish simple guidance so residents can challenge unreasonable costs without needing to have deep pockets.
I'm grateful. The Honourable Member talks about secondary legislation in making suggestions about what should happen next. The Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act provides protections for leaseholders on private managed estates when it comes to them having the ability to go to a tribunal to challenge management charges. So does he think that that ought to exist also for freeholders?
I think he makes an absolute valid point, and it's certainly something that I think the Minister should listen to today and take into account as we go forwards.
I think we can all hear from the number of members in the Chamber today that this is a problem across the entire country, but it certainly is for people in Lichfield, Burnwood and the villages. In the time that I have, I'd just like to focus on one of the estates where this is an issue, the Roman Heights estate in the village of Streethay on the edge of Lichfield. People who live in that estate know just how difficult managing agents can be. I've had dozens of households get in touch to tell me about the appalling service that they've received from their managing agent, who I won't name, but I'm sure it will be the first name that we all think about. Over the summer, I held a town hall with residents, and I heard the same thing repeatedly over and over again. Bills for management that were coming through completely irregularly, sometimes 3 bills for 3 years in the space of 3 months, which is interesting. Absolutely no transparency about the level of charge, demands to come up with huge sums of money at a moment's notice, and all the while basic maintenance like cutting grass just not being done. It left residents wondering just what exactly they were paying for. Absolutely, I can wait to my honourable friend.
Thank my honourable friend also from Staffordshire for giving way on that point. I've got a constituent who got in touch with me to say it genuinely feels like they're stealing money from us. Another one said, I just feel like we are a cash cow for these companies. Will my honourable friend agree with me that if managing agents and companies want to continue these services, they must increase transparency and make things more regular for their customers?
Yeah. My honourable friend's right. My honourable friend is a very, very good friend and quite often might have seen speeches before I give them, but hasn't seen this one, and it's a perfect segue into my next point. That transparency is so important. When I surveyed residents in the affected estate, 85% of residents told me that billing was either poor or very poor. 85%. 79% has told me that the management of the estate was poor or very poor. Now, I have written to that management company, and I am looking forward to meeting them because their written response is simply not good enough.
Would you allow?
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Just much like my friend from Staffordshire, I have constituents who are under the same management company, who, even trying to use mechanisms through the Landlord and Tenancy Act 1985, using the Section 21 request to see things, have been ignored, have been dismissed, and quite often are given incorrect information. So the question I wondered if my friend would agree with is, when the Minister sums up, whether he can talk a little bit about the technical measures for holding these organisations accountable and why they're not working as well, because enforcement of the existing rules ought to be enough, and when they're not, they should be changed. But there are mechanisms available that my constituents are trying to access that are simply not working either.
I thank my honourable friend for the intervention. He, again, he's very well appraised over the specific issue. But I think part of the issue we may be facing is that he's referring to an Act of Parliament which is older than either of us.
Yes, that is true.
And potentially there may be some significant space for an update in this space. I think it's clear from my honourable friend's comments and from everything that we've heard this afternoon that this situation is all too common. Up and down the country, managing agents are just letting people down. The long-term solution has to be councils taking on the management of these estates themselves. It is an absolute travesty that we have a bizarre situation where some people are being charged twice for the same service. Last week, I and other Labour MPs met with the House Builders Federation to discuss this, and I'd like to place on the record my thanks to my honourable friend, the member for Hitchin, for organising that. It was very clear, the message that came out of that actually the adoption is holding up those companies as well. Those companies want to see these adoptions happening faster. There are massive issues with the way that they get approached for things. One story that we heard of a particular local authority that demands semi-permeable paving as part of their planning process, but their same highways department will never, apparently, adopt anything with semi-permeable paving. Just a totally bizarre situation. It's not a case of two councils, it's one organisation where one hand is not talking to the other. Councils need to work harder on this. They need to make sure that they're working with residents, with companies to get this right, but they also need to have the money and the expertise to be able to do that. And I think after 14 years of cuts, freezes and austerity on councils, it's left planning departments hollowed out. We need to make sure that we are rebuilding that capacity to make sure that this can be done correctly. I think it's really important that we take this issue very seriously so that residents in my constituency and across the country get a service that they so deeply need and apparently are paying through the nose for.
I'm not going to detain the House very much longer because I think that the message that we need to send to the people that we serve is that we recognise this challenge. We recognise that the normal market forces which give consumer choice are not working properly in this situation. People are not able to choose between alternative providers. That the professionalism which is forced on commercial organisations through the pressure of competition is not working here, which is why we are seeing costs that are being hidden and obscured and, quite frankly, I think in some instances completely created out of thin air. That is not how a market is meant to work. There has got to be government intervention in this, and I say as a free marketeer conservative, that is not my default setting, but in this instance it is clearly what we have to do. And as I say, I'll conclude on this point, Madam Deputy Speaker. When the government takes action to deliver on this, they can rest assured that this side of the House will give them practical support and will be chivying them along at every opportunity.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a genuine pleasure to follow that constructive speech by the Shadow Secretary of State. Can I begin by congratulating the Honourable Lady, the Member for Reigate, on securing a debate on what is, without question, a critically important and pressing issue for residential freeholders and leaseholders alike across the country, and one that, as the Shadow Secretary of State rightfully said, enjoys a significant amount of cross-party consensus, I'd say. In opening the debate, the Honourable Lady spoke forcefully and eloquently on behalf of her constituents in Red Hill, and in sharing their plight with the House, I think brought alive the financial and emotional toll that leasehold terms can take on homeowners across the country, and the many excellent contributions that followed, Madam Deputy Speaker, from honourable and right honourable members powerfully reinforced the arguments the Honourable Lady made. And the case studies littered across those contributions were shocking, but will have not surprised anyone in this House. We all know from the work we do supporting leaseholders and residential freeholders in our constituencies that for far too many of them, the reality of home ownership has fallen woefully short of the dream. And it is precisely because, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government is no longer prepared to accept that situation we are determined to honour the commitments made in our manifesto and do what is necessary to finally bring the feudal leasehold system to an end in this Parliament. Now, I don't intend to detain the House for a huge amount of time. I know there's another debate to follow, Madam Deputy Speaker, but in the time I have available, I'd like to address the main issues that have been raised in the debate, starting with the various problems affecting homeowners on private and mixed tenure housing estates. But as ever, I'm more than happy to meet any honourable or right honourable member who has raised an issue that I'm unable to cover. Madam Deputy Speaker, as several honourable members have argued in their contributions, we have over recent years seen a significant shift away from a situation where local authorities, utility companies would generally adopt the respective amenities and public spaces within new residential developments to one where private management arrangements take hold, a so-called leasehold arrangement. Shared amenities and open spaces are now routinely not adopted and maintained at the public expense, and the maintenance costs fall to residents through an estate rent charge, a fee paid in addition to council tax. The estate charge also normally covers the management costs of the estate management company, although, as been evidenced in the debate today, residential freeholders frequently complain that these companies deliver little, if anything, beyond what a local authority would usually provide in an area where amenities would have been adopted. Now, my department estimates that up to 1.75 million homes in England are located on such private and mixed tenure estates, although not all are subject to charges. Properties on these estates often have restrictive covenants registered at the land registry. They may require homeowners to seek permission, often for a fee, from the management company for actions such as selling or letting their home or altering its appearance. And in the worst cases, Madam Deputy Speaker, residents face excessive or unjustified charges levied for minimal services. These may include, just finish this point and I will happily give way. These may include fees for services normally provided by local authorities, arbitrary and costly administration fees, unexplained increase in charges and fees imposed during the sale of their home. But I will set out what the government intends to do to provide leaseholders and residential freeholders with redress in these areas. And just lastly to say that the fragmentation of management on many of these estates compounds the problems we experience. Even on relatively new developments, homeowners may often have to deal with multiple management companies, each levying fees in ways that reduce transparency and increase the risk of exploitation. And homeowners understandably often feel in those situations misled and trapped. I will say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the Competition and Markets Authority published a study into the house building industry last year. It recommended stronger protections for homeowners and called for mandatory adoption for certain amenities on new estates and crucially, and this is crucial, common adoptable standards for those amenities. The government's response to that report accepted many of the report's recommendations in principle, but acknowledged that further work is required. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, can I reiterate today the government's firm commitment to end the injustice of leasehold entirely? As set out in my written ministerial statement of November 2024, we'll consult this year on legislative and policy options to reduce the prevalence of private estate management arrangements, which are the root cause of the problems experienced by many residential freeholders. And on this point, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd say in congratulating the Honourable Gentleman on the birth of his child, also gently push back on his assertion that we don't need to consult. Through the consultation responses we're receiving on issues like service charge protections, there's a huge amount of information we're gathering about that will allow us to implement these changes effectively into the lasting benefit of leaseholders. It's also vital, Madam Deputy Speaker, that homeowners understand what will happen to the estate they're moving into, and the government is currently consulting on guidance to support estate agents with their legal responsibility to provide potential buyers with relevant material information during property transactions, as well as what should be considered material information for buyers. And the government also wants to empower homeowners already living on estates under these arrangements. In September this year, the Law Commission published its 14th programme of law reform, which included a project on the management of housing estates. It will consider how residents could be given greater control over the management of their housing estates, and my department is proud to be the sponsoring department for that project. Madam Deputy Speaker, in the short term, it's imperative that we protect residential freeholders on privately managed estates from unfair charges. As honourable members will be aware, the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act contains provision for a new regulatory framework, broadly mirroring the rights already enjoyed by leaseholders, designed to give residential freeholders new consumer protections. We intend to consult again this year on how we implement these new protections to ensure the framework is effective, but I want to assure honourable members that I am determined to bring them into force as quickly as possible. Many honourable members have also raised service charges, Madam Deputy Speaker, in a wider sense, and it's right that they champion the cause of leaseholders in their constituencies. As I've made clear on many occasions in this House, this government recognised the considerable financial strain that rising service charges place on leaseholders and tenants, I reiterate the government's firm view that overcharging through service charges is completely unacceptable. In July this year, we consulted on the measures in the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act 2024 designed to drive up the transparency of service charges. We also consulted on proposals to introduce a fairer litigation cost regime, helping leaseholders challenge service charges and protecting them from disproportionate legal expenses. And in that consultation were proposals on mandating reserve funds and reforming the major works process. As I say, we've got a huge amount of useful feedback from that consultation, which closed on the 26th of December, and I'd like to reassure honourable members that the stories I've heard today will inform my thinking on how the government responds in due course. And can I briefly say on this point, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I would welcome in written correspondence from my honourable friends, the members for Kensington, Bayswater, Stoke-on-Trent Central and Stafford, some further details about why judgments of the tribunal are not being enforced in the cases they raise. Just before I conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, I must address the legitimate concerns that have been raised in respect of the performance of managing agents, both on freehold estates and in leasehold blocks. We know there are good managing agents who work hard to ensure that the residents they're responsible for are safe and secure and that the homes are properly looked after, but we also know that for far too many leaseholders, they suffer from poor practice at the hands of unscrupulous managing agents. And I've heard that many references to firstborn in this debate, Madam Deputy Speaker, that while I've been sitting there, I've asked my private office to send a request to the Managing Director and ask him to come and meet me so that I can convey some of the concerns that have been raised. Because managing agents do play a key role in the maintenance of multi-occupancy buildings and freehold estates. Their importance is only going to increase in the future as we transition towards common hold, so it's essential that we strengthen the regulation of them to drive up the standard of their service. Now, as honourable members will know, the previous government committed to regulate the property agent sector in 2018. They asked a working group chaired by Lord Best to advise them on how to do it, yet they failed to respond to the group's final report published in July 2019. This government has engaged seriously and constructively with the findings set out in that report. We've already taken forward a number of its recommendations. In our recent consultation on strengthening leaseholder protections over charges and services that I referenced earlier, we consulted on powers to appoint a manager or replace a managing agent, as well as mandatory professional qualifications for managing agents in England. But that isn't the final step in that process, Madam Deputy Speaker, and we'll set out our full position on regulation of estate, letting and managing agents in due course. To conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving the House an opportunity to debate these important matters. I thank all those members who participated in the debate today for sharing their concerns and insights, and I very much look forward to, and I say this genuinely, further engagement with Honourable and Right Honourable members as the Government continues to implement those reforms to the leasehold system already in statute and progresses the wider set of reforms necessary to end the feudal leasehold system for good in this Parliament, not least the ambitious draft Common Hold and Leasehold Reform Bill that we will publish before the end of the year.